The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
A premeditated act motivated by hate. That's how police described the killing of 4 members of one Muslim family in London, Ontario last weekend. Tonight, we're asking, how does a community face such hate and put an end to it? Then we'll update this story searching for answers for Suleiman Fakiri, who died while in provincial custody, as detailed on the TVO podcast Unascertained. And our Ontario Hubs explain how mobility data is helping Niagara region understand the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. It's Friday, June 11th, and that's next on the agenda. The attack in London, Ontario that killed 4 members of one Muslim family has left a community devastated and many more people beyond there reeling. But it also raises very hard questions about how such a thing can happen in the first place and what environment allows that kind of hate to fester. With us now to talk through some of that in the nation's capital, Shima Khan, who wrote the book of Hockey and Hijab, Reflections of a Canadian Muslim Woman, and a monthly columnist for the Global Mail. In Prince Edward County, Barbara Perry, professor in the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities and director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism at Ontario Tech University. And in London, Ontario, Salma Toba, PhD candidate in Health and Rehab at Western University. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for being here for a difficult conversation. And just to get us into the conversation, I wanted to read a little bit of a post that went viral. So back in 2014, former Progressive Conservative candidate Jeff Bennett encountered racist and anti-Muslim comments on the campaign trail in Ontario. Back then, he didn't say anything, and he's now grappling with that fact 7 years later after this unthinkable act of violence in London, Ontario. In a Facebook post, he wrote, "Boy, are we happy to see you at our door this election. I can tell by looking at you that Jeff Bennett is a candidate I can support." These are things people said to me when I was knocking on doors in London West as the PC party candidate in 2014. It happened many times. I would usually just thank them for their support and carry on. But it bothered me immensely. These people who had never met me saw nothing special in me. They were happy only that my name was English and my skin was white. Now I see people expressing shock that a racist terrorist would drive his truck into the pathway of a Muslim family going for a walk. London is better than this, they say. I can't believe this happened here. Bullshit. I knocked on thousands of doors in the very neighborhood this atrocity occurred. This terrorist may have been alone in that truck on that day, but he was not acting alone. He was raised in a racist city that pretends it isn't. This is just an excerpt from a longer post, and we recommend people read the entire post that has been widely circulated online. Selma, I wanted to start with you, considering that you are in London, Ontario. I can only imagine what the mood is like there. What was your reaction when you saw the statement?
I would say I wasn't surprised. I think he really hits the nail on the head on the way racism manifests itself in the city, and I would argue in the country at large. Not every Canadian, I hope not many Canadians, can see themselves mauling a family on an evening walk. But many do make comments like the ones Jeff Bennett is talking about, who is a real Canadian or who it is that they trust to make decisions in places of leadership and in positions of power. And that is how racism manifests itself on a daily basis.
Does it matter that he said it now as opposed to back then?
To me, it does. I really struggled when I read this. I'm happy that he is exposing this kind of racism and is really coming to terms with it and is calling it out and is apologetic that he didn't say anything in the moment. But it's been 7 years, and people are being killed. I'm really tired waiting for people to have this reckoning with themselves and with the nation. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have. So, as appreciative as I am that, he is made this post, I'm also really frustrated that it took this long.
Shima, what were your thoughts when you saw that statement?
Well, I was appreciative of the fact that he did make those statements. It's not easy to do something like that. It does take courage, and it takes a great deal of honesty. And it's never too late to do that. I think he's also sparked a wider conversation amongst the people of London, and I think people across this land, to look in the mirror and to see what they've done. It's vital what he's done. So I'm very appreciative of that.
And Barbara, what were your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I also appreciate what he said, because it really highlights what I often refer to as a climate of hate. The individuals do not act individually, but there needs to be an environment that shapes that hostility, that says that this is a legitimate target. So I think that he, maybe too little too late, but he has acknowledged, I think, the fact that it is a systemic issue. Hatred, this sort of violence is a systemic issue. It's not just an individual issue.
I just wanted to go back to one of the sentences that he wrote. He says this perpetrator was raised in a racist city that pretends it isn't. Barbara, in your view, is London a racist city, as Jeff Bennett says?
Well, I think I've seen, in terms of public opinion polling, but also in terms of the presence of the far right, that there's something about Western Ontario in particular, sort of quite broadly, that seems to house or host these sorts of attitudes. And I think London is one of those cities. I mean, Hamilton is another, Tri-Cities to some extent as well. And it's sort of a reactionary ethos amongst, one hopes, relatively small proportion of the population. I mean, these are areas that have been homogeneously white, homogeneously Christian, and in the last 10 or 15 years have seen really fast demographic change that isn't welcomed by everyone. And so the hatred that we're seeing is a reaction to change, and that's certainly what we're seeing in that context. But I think, it's also part of a broader pattern. It's not just London, it's not just Western Ontario, but it is a national problem that we're grappling with right now. I will say that has been one of the hot spots for far-right activity, not just in this current uptick in activity, but even in the 90s and early 2000s, which was sort of the last, heyday for the far right. So it really is a breeding ground of some sort that foments that kind of hostility that can give rise to these extreme forms of violence.
And Selma, just to build on what Barbara just said, at the vigil, there were thousands of people from different backgrounds, different faiths, and they all gathered to mourn the killings of this family. You live in London. In your view, is London a racist city, as Jeff Bennett says?
Absolutely. I think that this has been, well documented. There are tons of people who have written articles, op-eds, books about their treatment in London. I don't know a single racialized person, not just a Muslim person, but I don't know a single racialized person that hasn't had a racist incident in the city, with their varying degrees of frequency and concern. I think it's easy also to look at London and to ask the questions about why it is Southwest Ontario in particular houses these types of attitudes. But I think it would be a mistake not to tie the violence that we are seeing in this region to the violence that we see across the country. We can't, ignore the fact that we have had, 10 Muslim women, mostly Black, in Alberta who have been attacked since December of 2020. We can't, ignore the systemic racism that Muslim women face in Quebec amongst other people of faith. This is a problem across the nation, and I think it would be really easy to look at specifically this region, but I think we also have to tie it to the sentiments that we're seeing across the country.
I grew up after the post that Jeff Bennett posted. There was another politician in London who pushed back and said, London is not a racist city. We take care of our communities. I grew up in London. The reason I'm in London is because of a white woman in London, Ontario, sponsored my family from a refugee camp in Kenya. She had never been to that part of the world. This was before Facebook, Twitter. She had never seen a picture of us. And when she brought us to Canada, she treated us, we were her family. At the same time, growing up in London, it was really challenging because it was a very homogeneous environment, and my family experienced racism. We can't forget Philip Rushton. So just to, as a follow-up, Selma, we do have this perception that Canada is this, our brand is that we're friendly, welcoming, and in this moment, especially with what's been going on in London, people want to push back and say, well, it's not our community. We're not like that. What would you like for people, or how do we move forward if there's already that pushback that this isn't happening even after this tragedy has happened on our land, on this land anyway, not our land?
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone is denying or discounting acts of generosity and welcome and love, like you said, at the vigil. I think that was, that outpour of support was touching for so many, including myself. But I think that by looking away and by refusing to really be introspective about the violence that so many people of color have been saying for decades, have been facing, then I think that we risk losing the focus here. And so, yes, I think it's necessary, especially for young Canadians, to not lose hope, to look at those optimistic examples. But I think it is very necessary to keep the spotlight on not just Islamophobia, but white supremacist violence across the country and the way it manifests itself in violence, systemically, interpersonally, against people of color across Canada.
And Shima, people of color have been talking about this discrimination. In the past year, we've seen a reckoning where we're having conversations I don't think we would have been able to have maybe 3 years ago. In this situation, is it significant that it's a white Londoner that is making this statement?
You're talking about the statement by
Jeff Bennett, and naming it.
It's very significant. I mean, I can't think of another time following, another tragedy where someone, someone has has been so forthright. It's very important. And I think, you pointed out demographics are changing, and you see this not just in Canada, but you see this in the US and in European countries. As demographics change, there is pushback, there is discomfort, and we have to come together as a country and not just ask ourselves what kind of country we want going forward, but how hard are we going to work to get to where we want to be. And that does involve uncomfortable conversations. Some will not participate. I think for those, leave them aside. I think we have to work together and reach out with those who do understand and who do want to get the work done. And then slowly others will come along, but I would not lose hope. We are going through changes, and unfortunately what we've seen is pushback against some of these changes.
And as Sama pointed out, this is something that's been happening across the country. There's been multiple incidences. At the vigil, a speaker spoke of a young relative worrying about appearing to be too Muslim. Shima, is this something that you've grappled with, worried that you were, who you are will put you in danger?
Not after this incident. I think I felt that way after 9/11, which was almost 20 years ago. But I've been through many so-called battles. It goes back decades. I was in Quebec, at the time of the second referendum, and you can see it building, and at some point you say, well, I'm not going to change who I am, and given to the fear or to the hatred of others, I am who I am, and I'm going to continue to live as I am, if you want, defiant, but I'm not going to change my ways because someone doesn't want me to be who I am. I think that would be capitulation. And we should stand firm about being who we are and standing with dignity and courage.
And Selma, I want to ask you the same question too, because I know that it always feels like when something happens to, if someone else hasn't experienced that thing, it feels as if you have to like write a dissertation of what you've experienced and explain and kind of live through the trauma, and try to prove to other people what your experiences have been like. You know, I want to ask you that same question, and I don't mean to ask it as a way to make you relive that trauma or not to believe you, but I think a lot of people don't have, you know, when they leave their home, they might not leave their home with the same concerns as so many other people do.
Yeah. You know, my dad has said to myself and my siblings for years, don't jaywalk, because it may give someone who hates Muslims an excuse to run you over and call it a traffic accident. So this is something that, you know, we've been worried about for years, for our safety in public places. You know, and I think just the increased frequency and violence, I would say, and just the horror of the attacks that we're seeing just brings those fears to life, and that they're no longer what if, but when for so many of us.
And Barbara, you know, when we talk about what happened this past week, I've been rethinking the term Islamophobia. I saw someone tweet about it and say that when you say Islamophobia, it's kind of like arachnophobia, when, you know, the phobia, you're afraid of something. And they said that they would rather we use the terminology anti-Muslim hate. Does the language matter in this situation? Do we need to think about it, how we term certain things?
That's a really great question, because if we think about what phobia means, it's an irrational fear, right? You referenced arachnophobia. That's irrational. You know, most spiders are not toxic and aren't going to kill us. And so I think that in this context, to talk about Islamophobia, given what I described earlier in terms of that climate of hate, Islamophobia is not irrational, right? It's something that we are socialized to experience. You know, given the political narratives, given the narratives of the far right, and even of some academics, you know, it makes sense that there is fear, there's hostility towards Muslim because of the mythologies and the stereotypes that have been associated with them and attached to them. So, you know, I think you're absolutely right. You know, to talk about anti-Muslim hatred is, you know, we call it what it is. But I think, you know, we've been using the phobia for so long, it's hard to back away from that. But I think people need to understand the real roots of the term.
You know, what do we know about this perpetrator?
We don't know a great deal. We're just hearing some coming out of divorce records from his parents' divorce a few years back, where he's angry, confrontational. There was some mention that perhaps there was a swastika on his T-shirt. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he was affiliated with any formal hate group. I think the fact that law enforcement designated this as hate motivated so quickly suggests that there was some documentary about, you know, his Islamophobic or anti-Muslim sentiments. So what else do we know? I think we're learning that he was raised in a fairly conservative Christian household, and that the family supported things like, you know, right to life organizations, which suggests some, you know, very conservative values, which might include, you know, sort of exclusionary views of racialized communities of Muslims. Again, it's very early, and very little is coming out about him, but there's no real pattern. There's no one profile associated with the men primarily who have engaged in these acts of xenophobic violence across the globe, aside from the fact that they're typically young white males.
You mentioned his Christian background. I mean, I was raised in a Christian environment, and it's kind of shocking. We already touched a little bit. Selma was talking about this is not just a London problem to confront. you know, I'm trying to figure out the wording because some people might say, this is a huge leap from someone just, being racist, because racist is really harmful and damaging. But how does someone get from, being racist to committing this extremist attack where so many people were killed?
Yeah, well, it's not a linear progression. We know from, public opinion polls and from hate crime data even, we know on the far right that there are, in the Canadian context, tens of thousands perhaps who are anti-Muslim, but very few in this way. So I think that, we're going to have at how he was animated, how he was mobilized. Was there engagement with far right online? And then, you have to add in what is the personal benefit, if you will, for him of engaging in this sort of behavior. The fact that he was so calmly arrested and apparently, told the taxi driver to call the police and to film the arrest suggests that he was looking for his moment of glory. So did he want to be a martyr? Does he want to be, a hero for the cause, like Manassian was for the incel movement? That seems to be, one of the pieces here. So it's not just a Muslim sentiment; it's that desire to leave his mark, to somehow make a name for himself, even if in this, dark ways.
We have about less than 10 minutes left, but I wanted to get a reaction from Salma and Shima. Salma?
Yeah, I think, we have a lot of conversations, again, about London and about the sentiment towards Muslims in London and across the country. But I think it's also necessary to have a conversation about white supremacy and the way it manifests itself interpersonally and in the structures of our country. I know we're going to have a reckoning about the Bill 21 in Quebec. We have to, there was just a report that came out where it said that the CRA between 2008 and 2015, 75% of the organizations that lost their charitable status were Muslim organizations. We have to have a conversation about the way CSIS treats Muslim individuals and communities. The outgoing commander of the armed forces recently said, we have a Proud Boys problem in our armed forces. We have to have a conversation about the way white supremacy presents itself and uses the structures within our country to target and to harm people of color. So yes, it is an interpersonal issue, and yes, it is, a single individual in this case that, committed this act of violence. But we have to ask, what is it about the structures and the systems within our nation that makes him think that it's okay to do this?
Sam, I wanted to follow up with that. At the London Vigil, politicians of all stripes spoke of being heartbroken and outraged. Premier Doug Ford said, I want every single Muslim person, every Muslim family to know that we're with them. We'll always have your backs. Yet a few days ago, his government blocked a motion condemning Islamophobia that was, again, that word, and that was brought forward by Liberal Mitzi Hunter. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also at the vigil, and he said, Islamophobia is real, racism is real. And when he was asked to denounce Bill 21 that you mentioned, provincial legislation in place in Quebec that bars the wearing of religious symbols and that is said to disproportionately target Muslim women who wear the hijab or niqab, he maintains that it's up to the people of Quebec to challenge that legislation in court. If not now, after this unspeakable tragedy, what do you think it will take for those in power to go beyond words, which so many of them at the London Vigil said we needed to move beyond words and to go into action?
That's a really scary question. What will it take? And I think that's a question that not just Muslims, but many communities have been asking for years. I mean, we just, this country is reeling constantly from the aftermath of white supremacist violence and the consistency of it. We just, are reeling from the news of 250 children, babies, being, found in an unmarked grave in residential schools. And we have the Truth and Reconciliation Committee who's been asking for funding to find more money. We have communities across this country have been asking the government for action. for, you know, for actionable steps to be taken. We need to move beyond words. And, you know, we are reeling from this violence and the aftermath of it on a regular basis. And I think so many of us are saying enough is enough. We need, you know, you can't come to our vigils and express condolences after we've been killed and not do everything within your power to make sure that we stay alive.
And Shima?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Of course, you know, Erin O'Toole, who, you know, what was it, 4 years ago after the Quebec City massacre, when, you know, M103 was raised and voted upon, he, along with his Conservative Party members, voted against it. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. And here's a proposition. I understand why the Conservatives and the Liberals are, you know, are not voicing or not intervening against Bill 21, because let's face it, there's an election on the horizon and Quebec has a large number of votes. So there's a political calculation there. And this is what political parties do. Here's a suggestion. Can we put principle above politics and have the leaders of all the major parties come together and say in unison that we oppose Bill 21 and we are not going to let electioneering dictate or subsume basic fundamental principles of every Canadian in this country? Can we have our political leaders come together and say, you know, forget about electioneering. We all agree that this law is wrong, and we, you know, and come together and do what is required at a national level. That to me is true leadership. Otherwise, these are empty words. And, you know, I watched parts of the vigil, and the words from the politicians didn't touch me in one bit. For me, it was same old, same old.
And Barbara, you know, when I was talking about the London Vigil, I think all of the politicians said the same thing. We need to move beyond words into action. And my understanding is that hate crimes have been on the rise in Canada for the past few years. We have, you know, Shima mentioned electioneering. We have a few elections on the horizon. Can you give us a sense of the scope of the problem when it comes to hate crimes in Canada?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I share the frustration about, you know, this focus on words and language and the failure to act, especially in this context. So one of the things that we've heard from politicians is, you know, this is not our Canada. This is not our London. Clearly it is, because this is, you know, an extensive problem, not just for Muslim communities, but other communities as well. So, for example, in 2016, from 2016 to 2017, we saw a 47% increase in hate crime reported to police. You know, if we'd seen that kind of jump in any other category of crime, we'd have been asking for a national inquiry. We would have been so concerned, and there was silence. This is an extensive problem. It's not one that has been, you know, forcefully reckoned with. I think the other piece is, you know, you referred to, you know, action over words. We do have this lovely national action plan against racism, and I think it's time to move from the plan to the action in all of these areas.
Can you give us a sense of which groups are targeted and also why this is happening? Why is there an increase in hate crimes?
Well, typically year to year, anti-Black hate crime has been most frequent, then anti-Semitic, then anti-Muslim, followed by anti-gay violence, particularly violence against gay men. So those are the most targeted, heavily targeted communities. And I think there are a whole array of factors that play into that. You know, it's a historical legacy. We've never been, you know, without hostility, hatred, distrust of other communities. But in contemporary terms, that includes the political rhetoric that's been circulating, you know, vilifying Muslims, not just in the US with Trump, but in the Canadian context as well. You know, think about the hotline for barbaric cultural practices, screening for Canadian values. All of those are really thinly coded, thinly veiled sentiments that are meant to other particular, and even to vilify Muslim communities in particular. So that has played into it. I think that construction of the refugee crisis, as it was referred to, that really a couple of years ago, that sort of was collapsed with anti-Muslim sentiment, because it was Muslim refugees that were of concern. You add to that the economic anxieties in Western Canada in particular that were already emerging around the energy sector, and now we have COVID, which has exacerbated anxiety, fear in general. Asian communities are being affected, Jewish communities are being affected, but also Muslim communities.
I just wanted to give Selma and Shima 30 seconds each to what you both would like to see happen in the next little while. Shima, I'll have you go first, please.
I'd like to see leadership, political leadership, for one. It's time for some kind of principled action. Barring that, I think now it's up to civil society. The politicians won't perform their duties. I think it's up to each and every one of us to demand better of ourselves, of our communities, of our neighborhoods, to work at the grassroots and keep pushing. We can't just let this fester. It's going to get worse. Like I said, if you can't find, if the politicians don't lead, then it's up to us to lead as ordinary citizens and do what we can.
And Selma?
The National Council of Canadian Muslims, NCCM, has put the call out for a national summit on Islamophobia and calling political leaders of all levels to join the conversation and to address the nature of Islamophobia interpersonally, structurally, in all levels and across this country. And I think it's time for that to happen. I think it's time for us to have a national reckoning and a conversation about the nature of white supremacy in Canada. And like Shima said, if we don't see action, then things are just going to get worse, and we're going to see a continued escalation of this violence.
And that's all the time we have tonight. I'm really grateful for your insights, and our thoughts and prayers go to the Muslim community in London. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Earlier this year, we learned about the tragic death of a young man named Suleiman Fakiri from the TVO podcast Unascertained. It detailed the story of why his death in a prison in Ontario left more questions than answers. And now, thanks in part to that podcast, we have an update to the story. With us on that from Ontario's capital city, we welcome Yousef Fakiri, who is the brother of Suleiman Fakiri and founder of the Justice Rasali movement, and Yousef Zine, host of the TVO podcast Unascertained and co-founder of the production company Interspeak. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
It's very nice to have you both here, and it's really cool that you're both called Yousef. But just to avoid the confusion for our listeners, and what I think I'll do is I will say your last name as well. And Yousef Fakiri, you were saying that it's kind of cool because you and Yousef Zine went to the same school?
Yes, the same university. Yeah, we went to the same university. Yeah, Wolf Laurier.
And your names are spelled exactly the same. I mean, Mars. Okay, so we have an update on this, Yousef Fakiri. Ontario's chief forensic pathologist has agreed to review your brother's death. How come?
Well, first of all, Nam, it's long overdue. The postmortem report of 2017 is 4 years old. It's 4 years old. It does not include the entire facts of the case. It does not resemble the case of Suleiman Fakiri now. It does not include the eyewitness account of Mr. John Thibault or the guard Don Rosal, who was fired, that admitted that they used excessive force into Suleiman's death, or the fact that they did not use the spit hood. This was not included in the old postmortem report. My family's been fighting for the better part of 4.5 years to get justice for Suleiman. It's an important start now. It's an important start. We're grateful that Dr. Polanin has now taken over the case in terms of reviewing and updating the postmortem report. But let me be very clear. This is a guarded optimism. That is to say, guarded hope. We've already been failed by countless institutions, including 2 subsequent police investigations that frankly shocked us and that lacked integrity in terms of getting justice for my late brother. The Ontario government refuses to even acknowledge my brother's death. So that's where our guarded hope comes from. But I hope that they get it right this time, because this is the first time that an institution in government is taking a sincere and genuine look into the tragic death of my late brother.
I'm really sorry for your family's loss. And as you said, it's been almost 5 years. And we appreciate you being on the show to talk a bit about this. What's it been like for people across the country to learn more about your brother in this podcast?
They've been shocked. And I want to give credit to TVO, Yusuf and his team, Michelle, Kevin Young, for the incredible work. People have been shocked. They've been shocked in seeing what happened to a young man who was vulnerable, who had a mental illness, and the way that he was treated just has shown like how much problems exist within this incarceration system. Individuals that are suffering from mental illness. Canadians have reached out to my family and I've said, did this happen in Canada? Did Suleiman Fakiri have 50 bruises on his body? Legs and hands being tied, pepper sprayed twice. These things that happened to Sully could have happened to another family and will happen to someone else if we don't put a stop to this. And that's now the crux of our fight. We're fighting so there isn't another Suleiman. We're fighting so another mother does not bury their child the way we buried my beloved brother. And that's why people need to know what happened to Sully, so there isn't a tragedy such as this.
I'm very sorry. And where do you find the strength to keep the fight going?
Sully and I were 18 months apart. I was 18 months older than him. He was quite an inspiration for me. Mental illness, I'll be very candid, is a very debilitating, especially schizophrenia, is a very debilitating illness. But Sully, throughout his life, he was an inspiration. He found a way to learn languages. He found a way to still make the best with what he had. And he was my inspiration. I visit his grave every Friday usually. And I always make it a promise. I say, Sully, we're fighting for you. And it's not just you. It's not just your family. It's Ontarians and Canadians. And the strength ultimately now comes from the hope and the fact that his death and his tragedy and the man that he was, the gifted mind that he was, that we can make a difference, that could be Sully's legacy. He's gone. He's not coming back. And to be honest, we might never get the full justice that we deserve. That justice is for Sully to be here today. But at the end of the day, Suleiman's story should not be in vain. I don't want him to be another stat, because my brother had a story to tell. He was an uncle. He was a son. And more than anything else, he was a human being that deserved better. And I don't want Ontarians to go through what we're going through.
The most recent episode of Unascertained features an interview with the chief forensic pathologist. Let's take a listen.
There's a famous quote in the forensic pathology textbooks, which is that just because a pathologist indicates that the cause of death is unascertained by autopsy does not mean that the cause of death is unascertainable. In other words, the cause of death may very well be ascertainable if you enlarge the scope of evidence.
Yusuf Seen, what did you learn from that conversation?
Well, it was interesting. First of all, I didn't think that they would take our request for an interview. There are a lot of people who we reached out to who denied to give a statement or comment. So it was interesting when, as we were wrapping up the podcast, they agreed to speak to us. And when we first talked to Dr. Heyer and Dr. Plan, and Dr. Heyer told us he was getting emails about our podcast every day. So clearly they were listening and they were ready to talk about what was happening, what they were hearing. And what was interesting, that I think for me, the biggest thing that was interesting that came out of the interview, because he wouldn't comment directly on the case. And I, despite my constant, grilling and saying, we've been investigating this case for almost 2 years. This is all the evidence that we found that is not in the postmortem report. What do you have to say to that? How can you not acknowledge these very clear facts? And while Dr. Palenin wouldn't comment directly on the case, he did agree with me in saying that the questions you're asking are exactly the right questions, and even going as far to say, for example, when I brought the fact that Suleiman was left in a prone position with hands tied behind his back, Dr. Palenin agreed that
You
that
should
is,
explain what that is. Sorry, that's hands
yeah.
tied behind the back. Okay.
Yeah, so the prone position is when you're laying on your stomach face down, and what that does is it constricts the your lung capacity and your breathing capacity, especially when your hands are tied behind your back. It's a lot harder to get air. And that's the position we know Suleiman was left in, not even to mention the fact that he was pepper sprayed twice and had a spit hood, which is essentially a bag over his head, further constricting his breathing. So, these are facts that weren't included really in the postmortem report, or not taken into account. And so we kind of just laid it out for both of them and said, what do you have to say about this? And Dr. Palenin agreed that that is a risk factor for sudden death. So the question now is going to be, we know now that that's a fact, that Suleiman was left in that position. Dr. Palenin agrees that there's no debate that that is a risk factor for sudden death. Will that be included in his opinion in the cause of death in this new report?
In the first episode of the podcast, you said that you wanted to get answers. You wanted 3 questions to be answered. Now that you're heading towards the end of this, do you have those answers?
Well, I mean, for us, whenever as long as we've been investigating this story and asking those questions, it always came back to unascertained. When we ask why were there no charges laid, why don't we know all the facts about Suleiman's case? To us, it always kept coming back to unascertained, which is why we decided to name the podcast Unascertained.
Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, in the beginning, I thought unascertained meant that there is no cause of death. But what we've come to learn is that unascertained doesn't mean there's no cause of death. It means there could be 10. But the pathologist couldn't determine which one is the cause of death. And I think it's important also for people to understand, when a pathologist is putting together a postmortem report or reviewing a postmortem, they're looking at 2 things. They're looking at the medical science, what the body can tell us about the cause of death, and the circumstantial evidence. How did he die? What did people see? And that's why eyewitness accounts, videotapes, things like that are so important. And that's kind of what our podcast attempted to do, was to look at that circumstantial evidence and piece together a timeline. And I think we were able to do that. We do provide a couple of very comprehensive timelines of what happened to Suleiman in his final moments. But in terms of the answers to our questions, I think will really come once we read this report.
And Yusuf, Fakiri, when you heard that as a family, that the cause of death for your brother was unascertained, what was the reaction from your family?
Absolutely frustrating now, because you have in that initial report, they said that he had these number of contusions, the 50 bruises, the fact that his legs and his hands were tied. It was a profound amount of confusion, because my brother's alive before this incident. He was a healthy 30-year-old man. There was no health issues, and he's dead after. And so for us, literally for the last 4.5 years, we're always asking, like, why? And there was a lot of internal conversations with the family. My mom, me and my mom, or my dad or my brother, it's like, Yusuf, why? How? And it wasn't just us, Nam, that asked this. I had conversations with medical experts, like, in terms of people that asked about the case publicly. And they questioned the fact that this was unascertained. You had other people that were in this space that said, how did they come to this conclusion when you have all this compelling evidence that happened to Sully? When the OPP as well, Nam, called John Thibault, the eyewitness, a credible witness, and it was still an unascertained ruling. So unfortunately, what's happened is we've continued to suffer. We've been fighting, but we continue to suffer. And it's as if Solomon's life really didn't matter. The fact that he's dead was one thing, but the fact that he continues to be dead in front of us the last 4 years, and the government doesn't even acknowledge like what they did to him, and that they kept putting this unascertained ruling, is very problematic. And for me, it's been very hard for my mom, especially because they were extremely close.
Our love to your mom, Yusuf, and thank you so much for being on the show. We have about 30 seconds left, Yusuf Zine. If you can give us an idea or, an explanation, why were there no criminal charges laid against the officers involved in Suleiman Fakiri's death?
Well, again, I mean, I think it comes back to unascertained. It's sort of like, how can you tell who is responsible for Suleiman's death if you can't tell how he died? But, for us, I think the evidence we lay out in the podcast kind of shows very clearly how he could have died, and very likely how he did die. And so from there, that's the starting point for determining who is responsible. So I think a lot of people are maybe using unascertained as an excuse, but I think now with what we know publicly, that's not the case anymore. We know far more about this case now.
Well, we thank you both for your time, and Yusuf, our love to your family. You can listen to a new episode of Unascertained on June 23rd, examining these latest developments. You can access the series on Apple Podcasts or our website at tvo.org/unascertained. And also TVO podcasts are available on Amazon Music. Thanks again to you both. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nam.
Niagara Region Public Health used mobile data throughout this pandemic to help stop the spread. Our Hamilton-Niagara Ontario Hub's journalist, Justin Chandler, has been looking into what they've learned and how it might help as we reopen. And he joins us now from Hamilton. Hey, Justin.
Hey there.
All right, so how does mobility data collection work?
So basically, everyone's phone is able to broadcast location information, or information sometimes about their location or their intention to travel. And so this data comes from that. So when we talk about mobility data reports in relation to COVID-19, these are often big aggregated data sets that either show a lot of location data about where people have been going, or can be based off of things like map searches, which would show an intention to travel.
Now, some people who are probably listening to you right now might be freaked out that, oh my God, I'm being tracked. Should there be any concerns at all for that?
Well, I guess I would say you are being tracked and you could be concerned about that. But in this case, it's anonymized data. And so it's more saying like a lot of people might be going somewhere. It's not saying you specifically are going somewhere. So while I would add the caveat that yes, your phone could be giving specific information about your location to different providers, that's not what this is. So if you're concerned, check out your privacy policies and settings to see what you're giving information to.
All right, so in regards to this data, how exactly are public health units using it and obtaining it?
So as far as this, like I said, some of this is publicly available. So Apple puts forth its own sort of report based on map searches. Google puts something out based on location history, which is a setting that people have to turn on. But these are publicly available reports that public health can then look at and analyze. They can also get a little bit more information from those providers. And then there's also private companies that do, for example, marketing research or modeling that can take this information or additional location information and analyze that. So public health is able to look at all of these and get reports about how many people are going around and the locations that they might be visiting.
All right, so let's show two examples of how people are moving around. First, this is data collected by Apple about the way Ontarians are moving about. Can you describe what we're seeing on this graph?
So what we've got here is Apple's mobility trends report looking for the full province. And this actually starts in January 2020 before the pandemic was declared. And the movement that you see there, that's the baseline. So that's that movement in that period in the winter leading up to March. So as you can see, based on this chart, it starts out, it's flat at the baseline. And then in March, once the pandemic is declared and new restrictions come in, people are told to stay home, things actually start to shift quite dramatically. So you've got the red line is for driving, there's an orange line for walking. Those two are pretty closely associated. So they take a significant dip, and then eventually they start to peak up as things go towards the summer. And then there's a purple line for transit. That one also drops this one even more. And it actually stays well below the baseline throughout the pandemic. It's currently sitting at 53% less mobility on transit than before, whereas driving and walking are actually now up above. And so a couple interesting things about this. One of them, you'll notice that things move with the season, but they also move with pandemic trends. So for each surge of COVID-19, where more cases came in and more restrictions came in, you'll see a drop. And then as things got better and weather gets nicer, generally, we're seeing increases. So that's why we've got sort of a valley, followed by a peak, followed by a valley, and now we're heading towards another peak.
All right, now let's zone in on Niagara. This data is collected from Google. It looks like parks are quite busy lately, which is being shown in the blue line there. Can you describe these trends for us?
Yes, so for here, this data starts in April. We've got the baseline there, which again, this is from Google, but it's that same sort of pre-pandemic period. And so, as you said, with parks, we've got that blue line, and we can see that in April, we were sort of hovering around the baseline. And then as weather gets nicer and more outdoor things start to open up, we have a long weekend in there, people start to go out to parks much more. And now we're at 122% increase over the baseline period. With groceries and pharmacy stores, which are the red line, we can see that we've been above the baseline for the most part since April. We're at about 26% more mobility heading to those locations. And then again, transit stations well below in Niagara, below 50% of the baseline, and they're currently sitting at 57% less mobility when the data was last captured.
Now, you spoke to some experts for your article to help interpret these trends. Can you give us a sample of what they had to say?
So one of those trends is, like I mentioned, it seems that each major intervention to reduce mobility has actually done less than the previous thing. But we're also seeing that as the weather seems to be getting nicer, there are a lot more people doing outdoor activities. We're also seeing more people going to retail and more people generally going to residential addresses. These are sort of some of the major trends that we're seeing. And some things that they pointed out are that mobility overall is perhaps the best indicator that we do have of transmission. So epidemiologist Colin Furness was telling me that they track very closely. And it's unfortunate in a sense, he says, because mobility data, we know it correlates with transmission, but it doesn't actually tell us anything about safety. So you can know, for example, that 122% more people are going to the park, but it doesn't tell you if they're physically distancing. It doesn't tell you if they're kissing strangers. You have no idea actually based on just that information of what's going on. We do still know, though, that they emphasize again that mobility generally means more transmission. It's more opportunity to come into contact with people. And we have been seeing throughout the pandemic that when that goes up, so too tends to transmission.
And of course, as of today, people in Ontario will be able to travel around. Does that mean that we should?
So this is another one where it gets a little complicated. So I asked Dr. Mustafa Hirji, he's Niagara's acting medical officer of health, about this. There's been a lot of concern in Niagara about travel. What has been tending to happen is that whenever there's a spike in cases in Toronto or Peel, in a couple of weeks that happens in Niagara. The implication being that people are traveling there and spreading the virus. And that's been going on throughout the pandemic. But he pointed out that yes, the stay-at-home order is ending, reopening is starting. And of course, Niagara's economy is incredibly centered on tourism. So they actually do need travelers to come in there for that reason. So what this does mean is that people need to be careful if they are going out, that they're following public health orders and they're following the proper guidelines. So for example, he said, maybe it's okay if you come to a beach in Niagara, maybe that's low risk, you're outside. But if everyone is going to that beach, it's really crowded and there's no distancing, it's probably not a good idea for you to be there. And there's probably still a high risk of transmission, even if you're vaccinated.
And he did have this great analogy to sort of explain to people, who may not be getting the message. Can you sort of explain that one?
Yes, this was Dr. Furness's analogy, but he talked about, basically he said that vaccines make you disease resistant, or in this case, COVID-19 resistant, in the same way that your watch might be water resistant. So while you could maybe take that watch for a swim or take it in the shower, if you go deep sea diving, it's going to break. And in the same way, he said that this is how vaccines work. So maybe you have some more mobility now that you've got some resistance. Maybe you can start to see a few more people. But if you're doing a lot of that, you're greatly increasing the chance that you're going to pick something up and perhaps pass it on to somebody else, maybe someone who doesn't have the same protection that you do. It's also important to note here that the variant that is growing in Ontario, often called the Delta variant or the B1617 strain, is something that if you only have one dose of vaccine, it can still actually be able to infect you. So one dose is not the most effective at preventing you getting sick from this variant. 2 doses is better. So most people in Ontario are still quite at risk from this.
Some very good information. Thank you for that. Now, Justin, I do want to shift gears a bit. This week, you also spoke to Dr. Javid Sukera. He is the outgoing chair of the London Police Board about the London truck attack. And he had this very powerful quote where he said, "Your silence will not protect you." That was in your article for TVO.org. What was your takeaway from that conversation?
Well, we did have a very powerful conversation, I think. And what he was really trying to emphasize to people is that this allegedly Islamophobic attack is based in Islamophobia that happens in Canada all the time. So when he talked about silence, this was specifically his comment directed towards Canadians who aren't Muslim. And what he was saying was that while Muslim people need to stand up, be deliberate, still be Muslim, and don't hide in the face of this violence, the rest of us need to make sure that we're stepping up and we're actually confronting Islamophobia. He talked about how in Canada, there's often a lot of denialism. We like to say that we're not a racist country, that some people say there's no systemic racism in Canada. But what he says is that these things are here, and this alleged attack shows that. This shows that people are still motivated by hate and that they're willing to kill innocent people because of it. And if people don't stand up and they don't fight hatred and they don't try to stop these things from happening and be proactive, then more lives will be lost.
Thanks, Justin. And that's it for this Friday, June 11th, 2021. Ontario this week invoked what's known as the Notwithstanding Clause for the first time ever over election spending rules. Monday, Steve will debrief the whole story. I'm Jay Jaganathan. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. Steve, we'll see you again on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman.